Welcome to Storytime, brought to you by the OWSCyCon2019, the online book event of the year.
It was later in the morning. Her mother had returned from managing the undertakers, expecting to find Vivian in the morning room, set on the tedious task of going through the condolence letters. But Vivian had preferred to sit and read in the gazebo, where the sun ran through the pert roses in the garden like a waterfall, and the brightness and heat contrasted the heavy black curtains all over the house. The weight of melancholy returned as she followed her mother to the morning room, where she sat on the couch with a stack of telegrams and notes spread all over the cushions. Grandfather wandered in, and although Larissa spoke to him, he seemed not to hear her as he plunked down like a block of wood on one of the chairs, his arms spilling over the arms as he stared at the black curtains plaguing the room, darkening its pleasant peach and gray hues. They went on with their work for a time, with only the scraping of unfolding paper and the tap of the fountain pen on fibrous paper echoing in the dim room, and an occasional wheezing cough from Grandfather. "Look, Father, the Taylors." Larissa held up one of the condolences. "Still in Paris, but wasn't that thoughtful of them?" "Yes, what?" He looked at her open-mouthed. "The Taylors, darling." Her mother's voice rose a few notches. "They're in Paris, but they sent their regrets. Do you want me to order tea?" He leaned forward, and his fingers gathered as if he were plucking up a cup, and his eyes narrowed as if to examine it before drinking. Larissa reached for the bell cord. "Perhaps we oughtn't to tell people the chapel is haunted," Vivian remarked as she tore open another envelope. "It is not haunted." "Vixen in the dust, Vixen in the dust," Grandfather chanted, and then threw his head back as if he were going to laugh, but no sound came out. "You said no superstition could touch the Alderdices," Vivian reminded her. Larissa examined an envelope before setting it aside. The chapel was intended to be part of the house from the beginning. That wasn't what Grandfather said this morning. The Alderdices have always been God-fearing people. Larissa picked up another envelope from those stacked in perfect alignment on the desk. Vivian noticed it looked different than the rest, on plain, coarse paper with no seal. "If what Grandfather said was true," Vivian said slowly, "Grandmother must have had the chapel built to protect us from bad omens." "Chapels are always protective, if one believes," her mother said in an absent voice. "Well, this one has failed miserably," Vivian remarked. "You know how I disapprove of that sort of talk." "But it's true, Mother," she said. "We've had our share of family rogues and rascals and unworthy creatures, more than most families, perhaps." But she could see her mother was no longer listening. She was reading the note in her hand. Before, Larissa's face had been impassive with the business of correspondence. Now it suddenly grew pallid as if stricken by fear. "What is it, Mother?" She threw the letter on the table. What impertinence! What gall! Vivian peered at the page. It was written in a shaky hand. The paper was very plain, as rough as the envelope in which it had come. There was no family emblem and no heading, and the writing was neither light-handed nor curvy, as were the measured and refined condolence letters she had seen. "It's not from one of our friends, is it?" she asked. "Indeed not." "Who is it from, then?" "Read it yourself." Larissa reached for the teapot Bassett had brought in. Vivian read. "Dear Mrs. Alderdice, you don't know me, though I feel as if you ought to have if things had been different. I was your mother's friend here in Waxwood. Indeed, oh, indeed, our fathers grew up together. We were debutantes together, and Grace even gave me a picture for my 20th birthday. Oh, it was very sweet and a little forlorn. But no matter. I cannot express how heartbroken I was when I heard she was dead. Oh, how one forgets the years of one's youth. Yes, one forgets. Or one puts them away like locks of hair from a beloved one knows will never return. What must you think of me, I cannot imagine. I go off here and there now that I am old. My daughter Ruthie, she has such patience with me. Waxwood is the kind of place in which one may lose one's measure. Indeed, one may even embark on an adventure. Grace certainly did. But she was never really lost, was she? For she had me and Mama and Papa and Loretta and, oh, so many of us. No, indeed, she was not lost. She was only misplaced. Or is that losing oneself as well? Well, no matter. You will allow us to come to the funeral, I hope. Grace and I were such good friends. Surely a fine woman such as yourself would not deny an old woman who goes off now and then that last sanction. Remind me to your father. Bertha Ross. An odd letter, Vivian agreed. Odd is putting it mildly, dear. It's a crank, a hoax of some sort. Larissa slid the sugar bowl back on the tray. One is apt to encounter such things when a death is announced. You don't know who she is, then? Her mother leaned sideways a little so that her ankles peered out from under the skirt of her dress. They were well covered, but their angularity strained the leather casing of the boots she wore. Vivian recognized the sign. Her mother sat that way to expose the ankle so admired by the woman on Washington Street to reestablish her equilibrium. I've never heard the name before. Grandfather? Vivian peered at him. Leave him alone. The order cut like quicksilver into the darkened room. Why does she call grandmother Grace? She asked. Because she's mad, her mother insisted. No, Vivian said. No, I believe she's sincere. She dropped the letter on the table. The coarse paper had felt like needles to her fingers. Naturally, Larissa said with a grimace. Cranks are always sincere. And where is Waxwood? Stop asking so many questions, Vivian. Her mother reached for her fountain pen. We can't have her coming to the funeral, that much is certain. Bad luck, grandfather murmured. It certainly is, Father, Larissa said. Bad luck to have a mad woman at the funeral. Vivian eyed her. Superstition can't touch the Alderdices, remember? Please, dear. Larissa's voice was steady, even though the cutting edge was still apparent. What are you going to do? Vivian watched her. Her mother didn't answer, but leaned forward again, her feet sliding back under the table. Vivian watched as she scribbled a short note, sealed it with the Alderdice crest. She pulled the bell cord and Bassett appeared. Handing him the letter, she said, Please send one of the servants to deliver this as soon as possible. No reply, ma'am? No reply. The last was said with rigid eyes. When he was gone, Vivian said, You're in rather a hurry, aren't you, Mother? The funeral is tomorrow, Larissa said, gathering up the rest of the envelopes. She must not come. What did you tell her? Her mother sighed. I told her it was an invitation only for the funeral service. Vivian felt her pulse rise. It's rather cruel of you to refuse this poor woman the right to pay her last respects, if she was grandmother's friend. I told you, dear, it's all a hoax, a terrible hoax. Vivian had never seen her mother so insistent. Her forehead was damp and her shoulders looked as if they had frozen into hooks. What harm could there be in her coming? Vivian asked. Bad luck, bad luck. Grandfather was off again, his hand lifted as if he had a sword in it. Don't upset yourself, Father, said Larissa. Perhaps it would be bad luck, Vivian murmured, but not because of madness. Her mother rose. See that you finish your duties, Vivian. She placed the rest of the unopened envelopes on the couch. And send for Bassett to see to your grandfather, will you, dear? I believe he's quite tired. When she was gone, Vivian looked at him. Do you know who Bertha Ross is, grandfather? He had gone bewildered again, but Vivian saw his eyes were glassy as if a demon apparition had just appeared in front of him. Vivian noticed her mother had left Bertha Ross's letter laying on the table. She folded it and put it underneath the rest of the envelopes.
This story time was read by PJ McLean and brought to you in conjunction with the OWSCyCon2019. OWSCyCon runs from May 17th through May 19th. You can find us at OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. Again, OWSCyCon.OurRightSide.com. We have events happening across all genres. If you are a reader, you cannot afford to miss this event. You never know. You may just find your next best read.